Hey guys, it's Josh here with On the Wrong Lead. So I'd asked the guys to see if they could take, 8 to 10 minutes and kind of handicap a race, going front to back through their process. I know we have a lot of people, a lot of new people in our Discord and Reddit, asking, "Hey, what's everybody's process?" So I picked a race. It's going to be race 8 here at Gulfstream Park on Friday. So you should hopefully be seeing this on Thursday before the race, so we can kind of see how this race plays out. So I generally am more of a Brisnet guy. However, I have since switched over to using mostly Formulator. So going start to back, first thing I do is I load up Formulator. I got my PP here. I print it. Reason being is I just don't like using the interactive PP that they have. I keep it open, so in case I want to, go back and like run a query, or I want to check, stats or anything, I have it up. I can click on sire, click on trainer, all that stuff. But I generate my PDF and I handicap off my PDF here. So just resize it so you guys can see it all right. So I'll have it a little bit smaller, but it won't play that great on video if I make it too small. So we're going to go down to race 8. And so it looks like we're 7.5 furlongs on the turf. I have no idea what the weather's like, so hopefully this thing stays on a turf. So we're going to handicap it for the turf. I use Foxit Reader. I grab my trusty highlighter. And now what I usually do is I find whatever the buyer par is. And here it's NA, but let's say it was like 80. I would find anything that's within about 5 points of that, and I'd go through and I would highlight it. I'm just going to take a quick look, and I'm going to see what I think like the winning buyer here would be. And I'm just kind of eyeballing this, right? So like right now, for example, this Pletcher and Ortiz horse, 77. So I'm going to see if there's a lot of horses that are around that 77. Is it just okay? These two are MTO. All right, so we're gonna go with 75. All right, so I think a 75 or better is gonna win this. So I'm just gonna go through. I'm gonna highlight anything that I see is 70 or higher. And I generally do like the last like three to 5 races. And this is just to kind of, have stuff kind of pop out to me when I'm looking through this later. All right. So now we just got that quick highlight here. All right, we're gonna assume the winning buyer here is gonna be about a 75 or higher. So we're really looking for horses that have run at least a 70, are close to that that range. All right. So this is going to be a starter allowance. It looks like optional claimer starter allowance. So 3-year-olds which have started for a clean price of 50 or less, and which have never won a race other than maiden or claiming, or they're in for a tag. So like that's how this 3 here fits. He's been in for a tag. He's in for a tag. The 4 as well. Personally, I don't look at that stuff too much. I am looking for a couple different things. I'm looking for the pace of the race, and I'm looking for speed figures. So I kind of keep an eye on the time form numbers here. And like once again, this is just something I'm going to go through and kind of quickly look at. I'm focusing on anything that's around the same distance and the same surface. So in this case, I mean, you could go through and highlight, okay, anything that's a mile on the turf, right? That way you can have it. Some people are super big into marking up their form. Me, I'll do this Bayer or in Brisnet's case, the Brisnet figure. I'll do that. But you know, this is completely optional, and this is, like I said, this is just if you want to have a quick way to pick it up. I mean, I'll tell you right off the top of my head, this 5 looks real strong here with his speed figures both being at this distance at this track. But once again, that's just kind of, looking at it real quickly. And like I said, this is totally optional, but I'm just going to do this just to kind of give you an idea like where my eyeballs are going, Okay. And we're not going to look at the AEs at this, or the MTOs here. All right, so now we got an idea of where these horses have run at this near this distance, what kind of speed figures they have near this distance. Now we're going to take a look at pace. This is where I start to look at these pace figures. This 2 is going to be probably our leader because these are some nice juicy pace figures here. So this must have been a really fast pace, and this horse was pretty close onto it. Timeform gave it an early pace rating of 95, which is pretty good. We're just going to kind of eyeball through. Montana Man also looks like he's got some pretty big speed figures here. It's got a really nice effort here at Gulfstream. This 3 is kind of interesting with these pace figures. It looks like he did he tired out. It looks like he was bumped early, and it looks like he tired out here. But it's one to keep an eye on. Let's kind of keep going through. This 4 closed into a hot pace, and that's what these pace figures here. The red means it was a hot pace. Blue means it was a slow pace, and then you kind of get an idea of how fast each fraction was by looking at the pace figure here. So, like, the first thing I'll see is, okay, first thing that just popped out is nice big Bayer, but this horse closed in on a real hot pace. You see his his pace figures got bigger. So this horse is definitely a closer, and he got the benefit of getting that real fast pace here, and it looks like he might get that here as well. This 6 looks like to be pretty fast. This 7 might also chase a little bit. Has the pace figures for it for sure. This 8 is a little interesting because he's got what I would consider close to being a winning Bayer. Has run a 75 before, so he's definitely in the mix. And his last effort, he won. Rosario obviously aboard, but he won closing in, coming from 3 lengths off. Very slow fractions. So whenever I see a horse do something like that, I take note of it. So we got slow fractions, and the horse came from slightly off the pace. This horse moves up a little bit. Like this effort seems like a better effort than seen on paper, and he's already got a competing a very competitive figure. So this is definitely a horse that I'm gonna be using here. The 9, once again, this kind of fast figures here, but I feel like a lot of these horses are gonna be like, I feel like there's gonna be a lot of speed here. It seems like it's gonna be a pretty brisk pace, I think. Like Doesn't mean that it's going to completely melt down, but I guess I forgot to highlight this. But now I'm going to kind of keep an eye on, because I think a lot of these horses have thrown pretty good pace figures here. So now I'm just going to kind of look to see how horses have done on hot paces. This 12, this 12 is interesting. Zayas and Safi Joseph Jr. are hitting at about 24%. Landeros and Wilkes. Landeros has finally started winning races, so he's not a complete throwout yet. I think that these waters might be a little deep for him, though. He won last one in maiden 40. Nothing really super impressive, I think, from a pace figure standpoint. So I'm just gonna move on. The 9, I think I'm gonna toss. Yeah, I don't see any reason why the horse didn't do very well. You know, had a fast pace and then just did nothing. Is first up off the layoff and not really that close. 8, super interesting to me, is getting a jock downgrade, a really big one. But I'm going to keep him in mind, especially at his price. If he's anywhere near 8-1, I think he'll be interesting. I think 6 is going to be part of the early pace. I'm going to toss him because I think the pace is going to be too hot. I think this is going to set up nicely for this 5, to be honest with you. Interestingly, Rosario moves to this 4. Maker claimed him. Keep the 4 in mind. I think I like the 5 more, though. 3, I originally liked because of the pace figures, but I think the 3 is going to get sent to, and I think it's going to be part of this thing melting. 2 is very interesting to me. And the 1. So, just from a quick look, I'm trying to keep this kind of short. We could go back and forth and kind of break it down a little bit more, but I'm trying to keep this kind of quick. So I think at the price, I think the 8 would probably be my top pick here. Closing in off a slow pace. I'm hoping that that he'll sit just off. And I think that he'll float up a little bit. So anywhere between like 8 to 10-1, I think the 8 is worth a play. The 5 is going to get bet down like crazy. The 5 will probably go off at like 6-5, I think. The 5 is probably the horse to beat. But I think we'll be able to get a decent price elsewhere. And then I would also want to use some of this 4 with Rosario board. It's more of a jock play. I think Rosario does really well with coming off the pace. If you look one back, horse just missed at a similar level with a hot pace. And is losing Ortiz, but is getting Rosario, who might be the second or third best jock right now out there. But 5 horse to beat. I think you'll get a good price on this 8. So this 8 is also usable. And then I think 4 and 1 are the other horses that you're going to probably want to use. I guess as B's. the 1 is jumping up in class, but is getting Ortiz aboard, and you can't ignore that. And this horse does seem to be just like prototypical turf horse. So I think those are the horses that you're gonna need to use here. You're gonna need to use the 8, you're gonna need to use the 5, the 4, and the 1. If I were to order them in preference, at the price, I would want the 8 as my top pick. I think 5 is the best horse, so I would probably use something like 5 and 8 as A's, and then the 1 and the 4 as B's. So we'll see what everybody else says, but hopefully we're kind of close, but just different enough that makes it a little interesting. So thanks for watching.
All right, fellas, welcome to On the Wrong Lead. I'm Caleb, for those who don't know. Josh asked us to all handicap the 8th race at Gulfstream this Friday, and we'll take a walk through and compare some of our processes. So I have no idea what the other guys are doing, and this is the first time I'm looking at the form myself for this race, so I'm quite honestly just going to talk out loud as to what runs through my head as I go through this, and hopefully provide a little insight into the madness that goes on that occasionally lands me on a winner. So we have a 7.5 furlong race on the turf. It's optional claiming, really starter allowance optional claiming, 50,000 or less. First thing is 7.5 furlongs. It's actually a 2-turn race at Gulfstream. Brisnet will probably spit out some sprint stats, like route to sprint right here, which is pretty much irrelevant for this race. It treats anything under 8 furlongs as a sprint, despite the fact that this actually plays much more like a route. So I typically just start in the beginning here, knowing what I'm looking at. First horse is Mandate. He's a Todd Pletcher horse, and this horse just broke his maiden, so I typically mark these horses with an MCB, which is my shorthand for maiden coming back. I really don't like betting horses that just broke their maiden. They oftentimes are taking a huge step up in class, facing winners for the first time. It's very difficult, so I try to get around these horses, and ones like this, I don't have morning lines on, as you can see, but I'm quite sure he's going to take some money and be a short price. So he's got good figures. The connections have been really strong lately. They're hitting at 56% with a positive ROI the last 60 days. It's Todd Pletcher. I hate the fact this horse had to drop to maiden claiming to break his maiden, and it took him a few tries. I'm not super interested in this horse, but he does make sense on number power and looks like a horse he beat by 3 lengths, came back to win. So I'm not sure. I'll figure it out more as I go along. Second horse here. This horse looks like he kind of got out of a few pretty respectable barns with Kathleen O'Connell and George Stelgado. He's now got a win over the turf. He's got some strong figures. He's also moving up in class from a non-winners of 2 lifetime into an allowance or optional claiming here. Looks like the pace was really fast this race. 22-1, 45-2. These little plus signs on Brisnet indicate a fast pace. So it looks like he made a move into a really fast pace and then maybe went a little too early and got caught late. There is a just chance that maybe after the 2-month layoff he was a little bit flat. And might need a second race. Hector Barrios is a really strong 21% on the grass, and he has some just massive ROI numbers. So I always look for him on the grass. He's teamed up with David Fox for a winner. He owns a win over this course at this distance, and his numbers on Brisnet fit really well. So this is a horse that I am interested in. Montana Man. This horse took a long time to break his maiden, which I don't usually like to see. And then he goes to Bobby DeBona's barn after he did break that maiden. It looks like he's a little bit light on speed figs here, as others have run stuff in the 80s, and he kind of seems in that mid to high 70s. It does look like he has some speed. I would probably argue he's more, not like an EP1, but probably more like an EP6. I'm not going to do the math, but I think he shows more speed than an EP1 would indicate. He set looks like a decent pace last time. Judging by the plus signs, and those fractions seem quick. And he's also shortening up from 1 1/8 to 7.5 furlongs. So he's cutting back 1.5 furlongs here, which is pretty noticeable. He had blinkers last time out, and it looks like they're not coming off, so I would assume he's going to show more speed, like I said earlier, as he flashed significantly more speed in his first start with the blinkers. This is an easier race, so he should have a decent time, but he is in for a tag here, despite the fact he doesn't have to be, since he only has one win. I never really like seeing horses entered for tags when they don't need to be in for a tag in a race like this. This horse has some mixed signals, but I'm not too excited about him. Before you get Rosario up, it's a 14% rider, but we know he's solid, especially with Mike Maker. There's very few trainers in the game, at least on the East Coast, who are better at claiming a horse and then stretching him out on the grass. To be fair, Jonathan Thomas is a phenomenal grass trainer in his own right. Looks like this horse kind of ran an even race last time, wasn't anywhere close to the winner, beaten over 6 lengths, but he did hold for second. Note that Ortiz gets off here to go to the 1, which I don't really like to see very much when you lose a top jock, but he is getting Rosario on, so there's no shame in that. That last race came when the race was all washed off the turf, so I don't give it a ton of credibility in a spot like this. He looks like he has, more of a stock and pounce kind of run style, being that second tier. He's also in for a tag, but since he has 2 wins, including this one where he was not entered for a tag, he has to be in for a tag in this spot. This horse is a little bit interesting to me, especially with Rosario up. So he's one I'll keep an eye on. Next we have Rhythm Section. You get Saez up for Todd Pletcher. Saez is Pletcher's go-to rider here, so I usually kind of draw some little arrow to indicate that this is the first call pilot. If you go back to the 1 horse here, Saez was riding here, and he actually gets off the 1 to ride the 5. Now, this horse is also a maiden coming back, but this horse broke his maiden in maiden special weight company, which I like to see a lot better. Now, he did get what looks like some pretty favorable pace setups in his first 2, where he got a fast pace to close into and just missed in his debut. But I like the fact that they thought enough of this horse to move him into maiden special, and he came back and got the win. Really good turf pedigree here with American Pharaoh and then Unbridled Song. Distance should be no problem. You can see here these horses get a lot of turf winners. The Dams produced 2 turf winners in her own right. This is a nice speed figure here, 84. I don't like a dead closer, but I think this horse makes a lot of sense. I'm going to circle this horse. I'm actually going to go back and circle that 2 horse as well. This horse is I'm a little bit interested in, or that I know that I'm probably interested in. I would expect this 5 to be your favorite from what I've seen so far, which, depending on the price, is a horse I may or may not use. Now we have Captain D. Safi Joe has been cold lately, very cold since the FBI sting of Navarro. I'm sure those 2 events are completely unrelated. At any rate, this horse is making his 3rd start off the layoff here. He did, I pretty much just draw a line through this race as it was on the dirt, which is not something that this race is on, and he clearly just didn't really care for it or didn't care for first off the layoff. Now, unfortunately, his last 2 races have been bad, and he does get a pretty big class drop here, but he really hasn't shown anything. I mean, there's no shame in losing to Decorated Invader or South Bend. I mean, Decorated Invader might be the best new 3-year-old turf horse in America right now, with Structor having not raced yet. But Safi's been cold. Zayas is not on. Gaffleon's not on. This horse is probably one that I'd like to try to beat. He does have a more stock and pound style. If he runs back to that 93 number or even this 83, he could be tough. But the last form numbers don't really make me think it's likely he fires a big one here. Now we have Lure Min. This horse tried turf for the first time last out and didn't run bad. It looks like he had a really quick pace to run into, actually coming out of the same race as the 4-horse Dyna Drive, which is this race right here. Looks like he was running a good race. He wasn't miserably far off the pace. Looks like he went up the rail and just kind of got out-kicked late. I don't mind that at all. I'm not sure if Gaffleon's riding today, but if he is, he's not on this horse, which is a little concerning because he's certainly better than Christian Torres. But you do get the 5-pound weight allowance. I'm not a weight handicapper. I don't really care about that, but something to note. Yeah, this horse is usable, I suppose. That 77 is not good enough to win, but I could see a world where this horse gets a little better in a second start on grass. He's also moving up a little bit in class, although he's still in it for a tag, so it's effectively pretty close. I'm not sure. Some mixed signals on him, but I don't intuitively want to run to the window and bet this horse. Dominate the moment. I have no idea who this trainer is, but he's 5 for 15. And with very limited mounts, it looks like he's been winning at a pretty crazy clip. Something definitely worth taking notice of. This horse likes Gulfstream. He's 5 starts and 3 wins here. So I'll mark him down as a horse for course here. He's got a win at the distance and 3 wins on turf. Certainly is alarming to see Rosario get off this horse before I even look at his form, just given the fact that Rosario did pick up 2 wins. Usually jockeys aren't going to get off winners, so that is a little concerning. But it could just be a connections play as well. Rosario certainly rides a lot more often for Mike Maker than he does for Alan Nowinski. So this horse looks like he's got a really nice stock and pounce style. He's improved in each of his last 3 races, so I always like to note an improving horse with improving speed figures. I don't really know what he was beating in some of these races, but he looks solid. He's coming in off a really sharp workout, a 47 flat bullet. And Dylan Davis isn't really a terrible jock despite his rough start at Gulfstream. This horse is one that I am interested in. I'm going to circle. St. Benevolence. Cherry said to keep this at 10 minutes, so I'm going to speed it up a little bit. This is a horse that looks like his best race here, honestly, came on the dirt, which is not the surface we're racing on today. He's also coming off a bit of a layoff here. 5% trainer, 4% jockey. This does look like it was somewhat of a live race where the top 2 finishers came back to win. So I'm going to circle that and put a question mark just so I know to check on that to see who else came out of that race and where these horses went on to win at. But he is moving up in class a little bit just from the optional 35 to the optional 50. It's arguably not much of a jump in class, but a touch. And yeah, I mean, this horse got his only win sprinting 5 furlongs. Probably going to say no for this horse. The 10 is Bayou Prospector. Chris Landeros rides often for his father-in-law, Ian Wilkes. Chris Landeros has just not been very good. This is a horse that has 3 starts that are all pretty spaced out. He's also a maiden coming back. He's moving up in class. This 76 is not fast enough to win. Landeros is having a tough meet. This is a horse I'm not going to use. Probably just let beat me. He's also a dead closer, and I think there's others that can close better. So Gaffleon is riding on today, which kind of alarms me a little bit about this horse here with Gaffleon getting off. So this is a horse that started for a tag. He has a maiden coming back. You see a lot of these maidens coming back in 3-year-old restricted races, especially in the first half of the year. So I make more of an exception to my rule about betting them in these kind of instances, but by and large, I don't like to do it. This horse won pretty convincingly, and he's not in for a tag today, as you can see here. So clearly they saw something they liked in the debut, enough to run him here, not for a tag. Christophe Clement's a really solid turf trainer. I mean, the horse has done nothing wrong. Ever since coming out of that win, it looks like he has a relatively consistent work pattern about every 7 to 10 days. So this horse, he ran a good figure here in 81. If he improves at all on that, he's probably dangerous here. He's pretty interesting. And then last is the 12. It's another Saffy horse who's been cold, especially on the turf. I'd have to look that up, but I feel like he's very much been even colder on the turf than normal. So Zayas rode another one. I think he rode the other Saffy horse here. And it always pays attention to watch the jockey carousel to see where they go. Pretty good chance if Saffy has 2 in, Zayas rode back both last time and ends up on the 12, that if you're going to bet one, this is probably the one that you want. This horse is coming out of a stakes race, but it's at Turfway. I don't know how good that stakes really is, and he really wasn't ever threatening in that race. He finished beaten 12 lengths. Before that, he ran another stakes. Tried the Holy Bull. Connections may have had a little Derby fever. He does have a pretty decent win, but it's at Tampa, which is a worse track than Gulfstream. So I don't know how much credit I really give that win. And he's also all the way out in the 12 post. If you look at, you can't always trust Brisnet because their track diagrams are often wrong. But if you look at the track configuration here, if you're starting here and the turn is right here, you don't have much time to get over. So this horse is likely to either have to gun it from the front, and I don't know that he's that fast, get stuck super wide, or drop way back and to try to save some ground. It's going to be a bad trip. This is a really good race if the speed figures to be believed, but I'm not sure that I love this horse. He's kind of a question mark. I could probably get to him at 5 or 6 to 1, but if he's like 7 to 2, I'm not very interested. I'm going to ignore these two because they're main track only. It's an interesting race here from a pace perspective, but I'll bring up optics, and typically I do this first, but I'm going to try to go fast here. Not a very good optics plot to use because there's so many horses that haven't run the surface distance. Optics is considering this a sprint, which also makes it kind of useless. And it also includes the main track only, so will be scratched as Q1 squares, which makes them pretty serious contenders. So I don't really give a lot of credibility to this plot, at least not until it's updated. Probably what I would notice is that there's no clear-cut dominant horses. It looks like there's really no clear leader. I would think that maybe from the outside post, the 12 horse may be forced to send, even if he doesn't want to get hung super wide. Another horse I think will probably be involved in the early pace would be this 8 horse. And then the last one who I think could probably get involved early might be, I think it was the 2 or the 3 horse here after showing speed last time, adding blinkers. I think those are horses that are probably going to show speed. I should have marked this earlier. I don't believe this is a pressing horse. I think he's more like an EP, given the fact he showed speed here, and then he kind of stalked and had some speed here and here. So I would say in this race, the horses I'm most interested in, I liked the 2. The 3 I sort of have as an if-com. He needs to improve, but he probably should be forwardly placed and has an aggressive turf jock who's connected with Bobby DeBona before. Wouldn't be impossible. The 4 loses Ortiz but gets Rosario. I also kind of consider him like a maybe kind of horse here. The 5, probably your favorite, but probably needs used just off of the connections and the strength of his 2 races. He's been very consistent. Wasn't crazy about the 6, wasn't really crazy about the 7 either. The 8 I do find interesting. He's improved 3 starts in a row. He's got a strong workout, a good trainer. He has some early speed. So I do like the 8. And then the 11 and 12 are both kind of maybes for me. The 11 was that maiden coming back horse, and the 12 was a horse who might not get the right trip. So I'd probably set this race something like this at first pass without working on structure. If I had to pick a single horse to win, I'd probably not use this 5 just because of the price and the fact he's a maiden coming back. He might go over to this category. I'd probably end up on the 2 or the 8. I think the 2 has strong numbers and probably just missed time to move, but he is moving up in class, and he was beaten pretty handily by whatever Uncorked Bottle or whoever this horse is when they faced each other before. Uncorked the Bottle, yeah. The 8 horse, I think, is on an improving pattern and probably will get overlooked a little bit. But the horse does have 3 wins, and people do like to bet winners. So I think I'd probably lean 2 over 8 here if I was going to make a selection. So I guess I'll make the 2 my top pick, and then the 8 will be my second choice. But the rest of these would all be horses I'd look to include. So there you have it. That's my probably too long take on how to handicap a race. I'll end up on the 2-8 here, and this is before workouts, scratches, or track conditions, so this is obviously subject to change. But it'll be interesting to see how the other guys come up with anything.
Hey everyone, it is Pack from Horse Racing Reddit and Horse Racing Discord. We are starting up a new thing where we're going to start watching some of the On the Wrong Lead guys handicap races. So, and then I guess apparently Josh is going to put them all together and make them look palatable so we don't all look like morons. For this week's segment, we're going to do the 8th race at Gulfstream Park on Friday, May 8th. So I have not seen any of this so far. So here we go. Let's get the 8th up here, and I'm going to throw the optics up over here just so I can take a look at the plot. So I tend to be a speed first handicapper, meaning that I'm looking for the horses, and I start with speed, and I'll look at previous performances. So I'm going to look at a race like this, and I'm going to try to find, who's run speed figs that are competitive, and I'm going to at least start there. One thing I'm going to do right off the bat is I'm going to turn off morning line odds because I just don't care. They mean nothing. And we'll start working through this formulator and see what we can come up with. Now, normally the first thing I like to do is look at conditions. So this is the 8th at Gulfstream Park. It's about 7.5 furlongs. At Gulfstream, 7.5 furlongs is a 2-turn turf race. This is an optional claiming 50. It means that in Bears, or on Formulator, if you have a number here that says 50,000, that means you can claim the horse for 50. But because, and I would tend to look at a race of these optional claimers, these have replaced sort of starter allowances. So if you see a tag price, it normally means the horse isn't as much quality as you would you'd like to have. Because if you're either a horse that you're willing to lose versus ones you're not willing to lose. And I know Gulfstream plays pretty, on or just off the lead in these two-turn races, sort of like the Saratoga Inner. They're pretty positional. You want to be sort of, forwardly placed. And so I'm going to look for those types of speedy horses. And also, Gulfstream seems to, at least to me, I don't cap a ton of Gulfstream. It's not my best track, but it's a track where I want to look for, jock moves. Who's gotten off a horse, gotten onto a different horse. So going through these, there's a Florida bred bonus. It's for 3-year-olds which have started for a claiming price of 50,000 or less and which have never won a race other than maiden or claiming price 50,000. So these horses have just had to have run for a tag of less than 50, and now this is very much a starter allowance, the old school starter allowance type conditions. So I'm just going to go through and look at speed figs. I'm going to look at definitely going to find horses that have run on turf and try to find those figs. So right off the bat, Mandates run a 77. That's the best fig I see on turf so far. Anyone else? Okay, so this rhythm section, the other Pletcher in here, has run a 72 and an 81 fig. Figs are right here in the middle and dark, and I'll try to keep it so that my head doesn't block them so people can take a look. So that's the best fig right now. Let's see if anybody got better than an 81. Does not look like it. I'm going to assume this stays on the turf, so I'm going to ignore the MTOs. So it looks like we have a pretty full field. This looks like a fairly competitive race. One thing I like to do, and I'll just note, there's this Bears Par fig. In this race, there is not one, but Bears Par, they look at sort of what's the average for a horse running at this condition and these levels. What's the average fig? And I like that because it oftentimes I could look through the race, and if I see that, these horses are averaging 90s, but, we're seeing a bunch of horses that have run the upper 70s, I would know that this is a weak race comparatively, and I might want to be a little more spready. I might want to increase my range. And vice versa. If I see that, this race that a bunch of horses have run better than this, I may narrow my range down and just focus in on a couple that have run better than that Bears Par. I don't have one here. I'm going to assume, let's see what so that rhythm section horse, Sayers looks like he has choice in here. So he took, and what I mean when I say choice, he was on this other Pletcher horse. You can see he was the jock that broke at a maiden 40 level. So, at a maiden for a tag, and that's why this horse is eligible. And the horse ran that 77. So I would assume that the better of the two horses here, at least in Luis Sayers' eyes, is this 5 rhythm section. Now, another thing to note, this horse is cutting back a little in distance, which isn't a huge deal here, but he and Pletcher have had a really good success, 26% over here, and, the horse did break its maiden as 1 for 2 across the surface, so it can get around this track. A lot of things to like there. I'm gonna look at other horses. You know, you have those two that have thrown up good figs. Looking for horses that are eligible to move forward. A couple things. I'm somebody who tends to play horizontally, so I'm looking for winners. I'm not necessarily looking for a big price that might suck up, or a race that I'm not thinking in that vertical player's mindset. I want the horse that's going to win the race. Um, and so I may approach this race a slightly bit differently than other people in the stream. And also, I have a notepad sitting here. I normally handicap on a graph paper. And the reason I do is it makes it really nice little boxes. I can write my ABC structure right out on the graph paper, and then I can move horses around, and I can go back after the fact and see, geez, I had this horse as an A, but I made it a B. A lot of times I'll write notes on why I do that off on the side. And yeah, so let's see what else we have in here. I'm looking at connection percentages. I can see, David Fox has not been having a great Gulfstream meet. Probably not a horse that, I really want to use. The one horse that sort of has been knocking around at these levels here is this Mountain Man. A horse that's definitely usable to some degree, just because of the fact that, and I know Caleb is going to say the same thing I do, I don't like last out maiden winner breakers going versus maidens. They tend to perform poorly, and both of the Pletchers, the 1 and the 5, broke their maiden last out. So I tend to fade those horses a little bit. Captain D just doesn't look. Captain D sort of I don't know. There's a little bit of something to be said. Horse has back class. Fall last year was pretty good. You toss away, you throw away that 33, which is on dirt, obviously the wrong surface, and you look at this last out in the Cutler Bay. Horse is getting a massive class drop. It's a horse that people who look at figs will look at those last 3 and go, oh, the horse just hasn't been competitive. Well, there's definitely some excuses there. This is a pretty massive class drop. So the 7 and figs don't really fit, and stepping up in class. Dominant Theorem, getting Dylan Davis, who I just don't love. Low percentage trainer on turf sprints, so I may use, but in a real more defensive way, depending how big a structure is here. And Bayou's Prospector, the Ian Wilkes horse, that's sort of interesting. If Linderos wasn't like the world's worst jock. Another last out maiden breaker, and another horse taking some real. Well, that's kind of an interesting line there. Zayas was on a couple of these in here last out. He lands here, and this is a horse that is dropping in class. Broke its maiden across the Gulfstream turf. Broke its maiden across the Tampa turf, and has run once in the Gulfstream turf and was second by 3.5 lengths. Okay, let's see what Optics says about how this race sets up. On Optics, I'm gonna, you look at the standard plot. If there's not a lot in the surf distance, don't have a ton. The 3 is a must use here. Well, probably the 3 and the 6 are must use. They're horses that are going to be forwardly placed, sort of those horses that have squares that fall in the Q1 area. Not a lot of other information on here, and a lot of these you really don't know what you're getting. So who's the 3 and the 6? Mountain Man, Mio horse. That horse is interesting. And Captain D, who's dropping down, who's getting all the class relief, who should be very forwardly placed in this and set a nice trip. I don't want this to drag on forever, because this is one race that I could spend probably another 20 or 30 minutes really looking at. Of the 2, Pletcher horses, I would make the 5 here, Rhythm Section in A, just because the horse, it makes a lot of sense. Figs-wise, the best horse in the field, and did break its maiden in a maiden special weight, cutting back a little in distance here. But if I look at the run style, horse looks like it's going to be, really have to get through some traffic. Don't necessarily love that, but that big last out fig and say as having choice, that's a horse that I would definitely need to use. The 3 I really want to use, but not a great turf sprint trainer. And then this Captain D horse as well. Man, Josh picked a doozy of a race. I'm gonna end up probably with a couple of, with a lot of this field. And I'm honestly having a real hard time figuring out who else I want in here. 12, where was that? A little more forwardly placed speed type, but broke it a better distance. Yeah, I think you have to make the 12 an A as well. Improving turf form seems to be a kind of right horse for that type of distance. Who else do I want in here? I like the 3 and I like the 6 as well. This is one of those races where you hope there's a scratch, and you can sort of move your plays around a little bit. I'm probably... Zaz technically was on this one as well, so he gets off here to some degree. And Zayas got off that horse as well. Okay. Well, maybe I just leave the 2 horses that kind of jumped off paper as A's. So Rhythm Section and Uncork the Bottle would sort of be my 2 A's. I definitely want some mandate with a Rad jumping up for Pletcher. So the 1 would end up being a usable B type horse. The 3 and the 6 both as well would be usable B type horses that have some history, have some form. Both are getting a little class relief, depending on how deep you're playing. I mean, the 6 is definitely getting more class relief than the 3 is. The 6 would be the one that I'd want a little more of than the 3, and then there's a few others in here that are sort of. I mean, also Dominant Theorem here. The figs don't really fit. Has been running it weaker, but that's optional 25. This is optional 50. I just want to check and make sure it was running it weaker. But it is a horse that's won 2 consecutive races. Now Rosario gets off, which is a big loss as far as jock's concerned. So horses I would want in here, and I would want some piece of Bayou Prospector and however you say it, Arithmetic. Just on the fact that horses with 1 start, it wouldn't surprise me if they improve. TGAF probably got a feel for this one. It wouldn't shock me if it moved forward, and also the same thing can be said about Bayou Prospector. So that actually gives me 5. Gives me 5 Bs, so I would be 5-12 over 1, 3, 6, 10, 11 on first pass there. I don't know Gulfstream super well. It's not a track I cap a ton of. I would definitely move these around a little bit based on post position. I don't know how the numbers work here. I'd have to look that up and see, is the outside a good place to be or not. A lot of times in these shorter distance 2-turn races, sort of like the 8 and further out pull tend to be really bad. And if that's the case, I would move the 12 down to a B just off the draw, and I would be prone to moving the 6 up to being an A. So it would be 5 and 6 as A over over what numbers I'd said before. I'll leave that at now. I hopefully gave Josh some decent footage to play with, and yeah, good luck. This is quite the race.